Okay, so let's see. Really happy to see everybody. Let's see, it's October 27th, 2024, and we're still at Sita's End. Let's see. Today we have the honor of being joined by River Shannon. I just met River recently at San Francisco Zen Center, and she gave a Dharma talk, and I was just so moved by it that I felt like I had to invite her to come and speak at our group. My first impression was that River radiates a lot of charm and a lot of fresh energy and a lot of wisdom. And yeah, I mean, it's just very inspiring for me to meet young people that are interested in the practice. You know, you can see from the demographic of our group that like probably the mean age is like 70. So I'm so happy to see a fresh face and some new energy. So I want to welcome you, River, with a lot of heartfelt gratitude. And then I guess briefly, I'll say that River's a student of Zen Buddhism and the lineage of Suzuki Roshi. And she received priest ordination in October 2023 from Miyashin Kate McCandless in Vancouver. And River practices as a lawyer, and she does legal work for survivors of intimate partner violence. And she's going to speak today about the 10 minds of Samantabhadra. Samantabhadra is the Buddha of practice, so practice activity. So it's a real thrill to have you here. Thank you so much for coming today. I know it's an effort to pull the talk together, but deeply grateful. So thank you. Welcome, River.
Thank you so much, Kirk, for those sweet words. As Kirk mentioned, my name is River Shannon, and I'm a novice priest up here in Vancouver, not so far from Portland in British Columbia. And I practice with a small community up here called Mountain Rain Zen. I'd like to thank Kirk for inviting me to share some thoughts with you all today. He even let me pick the topic, which is very, very kind of him. My community is in the midst of its fall practice period right now, and we are studying the Avatamsaka Sutra, or the Flower Ornament Sutra, with our Shuso and my beloved elder Dharma brother Daikon Green. The Flower Garland Sutra is one of my favorite texts, despite its terrifying length at 1,600 pages. At least the Cleary translation is about 1,600 pages. If you've never read the Avatamsaka Sutra, it feels like accidentally ingesting a heroic dose of DMT. For example, the sutra opens like this. At that time, the Buddha, the world-honored one, in this setting, attained to supreme correct awareness of all things. His knowledge entered into all times with complete equanimity. His body filled all worlds. His voice universally accorded with all lands in the 10 directions. Like space, which contains all form, he made no discrimination among all objects. And, as space extends everywhere, he entered all lands with equanimity. His body forever sat omnipresent in all sights of enlightenment. Among the host of enlightening beings, his awesome light shone clearly like the sun emerging, illumining the world. The ocean of myriad virtues, which he practiced in all times, was thoroughly pure, and he constantly demonstrated the production of all the Buddha lands, their boundless forms and spheres of light extending throughout the entire cosmos, equally and impartially. He expounded all truths like spreading great clouds. Each of his hair tips was able to contain all worlds without interference, in which each manifesting immeasurable spiritual powers, teaching and civilizing all sentient beings. His body extended through the 10 directions, yet without coming or going. His knowledge entered into all forms and realized the emptiness of all things. All the miraculous displays of the Buddhas of past, present, and future were all seen in his light, and all the adornments of inconceivable eons were revealed. So that's one of the opening paragraphs of this sutra. It is, even though kind of inscrutable, such a warm and beautiful and comforting text. And I recommend, and I think someone has recommended reading it while listening to drum and bass or the Grateful Dead. Even though I think few people are probably interested or up for the hike through all 1,600 pages of this Mammoth Sutra, its core teachings have been, I think, part of the background scaffolding of Zen practice. The sutra primarily explores, through its ornate language, the blazing fullness of interdependence of reality, a kind of a counter to the common misapprehension of emptiness as a nihilism. Then, once it has captured this feeling of interdependence, not as an emptiness of form, but as all forms mutually co-arising and supporting each other, it begins to propose what it might look like for us from an ethical, practical perspective to live our lives in the warmth of this interdependence. To quote the translator of the sutra, Thomas Cleary, the flower ornament doctrine shows the entire cosmos as one single nexus of conditions in which everything simultaneously depends on and is depended on by everything else. Seen in this light, then, everything affects and is affected by, more or less, immediately or remotely, everything else. Just as this is true of every system of relationships, so it is true of the totality of existence. Or, to quote a more modern teacher, Tenshin Reb Anderson, in his commentary on the Samdhi Nirmochana Sutra, a Buddha is someone who sees things the way they really are. When we see things the way they really are, we see that we're all in this together, that we're all interdependent. A great surpassing love arises from that wisdom. And that love leads Buddha to wish that all beings would open to this wisdom and be free of the misery that arises from ignoring the way things are. Buddhas appear in the world because they want us to have Buddha's wisdom, so that we will love every single being completely and protect every single being without exception and without limit, just as all the Buddhas do. To love every single being completely and without exception. When I read those words, I feel so deeply that this is what my practice is calling me to do. And this kind of feeling arises when I also read words in Zen, such as nirvana and samsara are one, or practice and awakening are one. It seems to me that there's this idea that I'm no longer trying to escape an impure, painful world, but that I'm being invited by practice to dive headfirst into the chaos of my life, knowing it to be a complete, tangible expression of this ultimate interdependent reality. The mascot for this approach is Samantabhadra, the Bodhisattva of enlightened activity. Samantabhadra is a prominent figure in the Avatamsaka Sutra, in the Flower Ornament Sutra. The first time I've seen them show up, I think this is so wonderful because I don't hear much about Samantabhadra. I hear a lot about Kannon Bodhisattva, the Bodhisattva of great compassion. She gets lots of airtime in our Dharma talks, in chants, artwork, and that's totally deserved. And Manjushri, the Bodhisattva of wisdom, not only gets primacy of place in a lot of our wisdom literature, but also gets to sit on a lot of our Zendo altars. And during practice period, a Tassajara receives regular baths. If Manjushri represents our innate Buddha wisdom and Kannon our innate Buddha compassion, then Samantabhadra, to me, the Bodhisattva of enlightened activity, awakened activity, represents our innate power to put these Bodhisattva virtues and insights into practice in life itself, whatever that might look like. In talking about Samantabhadra, Michael Newton, one of the guiding teachers of our community, suggested that this kind of mascot of awakened activity is exactly what we need in these troubling times. In a recent sharing circle in our community, I surprised myself by sharing a feeling that I've been having for some time without really knowing what it was. As a transgender woman, when I read about laws being passed to prevent transgender people, especially children, from receiving gender-affirming care, not just in the United States now, but in my home province of Alberta, Canada, I feel so fearful and angry. I feel so angry when I hear about the suffering of innocent people in the wars going on throughout the world, especially the suffering of women and children. Or when I hear about the suffering of people in these awful climate events, even as corporations and governments pump more and more greenhouse gases into the air. I can feel my heart constricting with fear and outrage when I hear about these things. Even though I think those feelings of anger are valid and maybe even vital, I do not like what they do to my heart. Through our practice of Zazen, I have occasionally come to feel what Thomas Merton meant when he wrote, "I suddenly saw the secret beauty of their hearts, the depth of their hearts where neither sin nor desire nor self-knowledge can reach, the core of their reality, the person that each one is in God's eyes. If only they could see themselves as they really are. If only we could see each other that way all the time. There would be no more war, no more hatred, no more cruelty, no more greed. I suppose the big problem would be that we would fall down and worship each other." I once had a thought after a sesshin at Tassajara that if I could intellectually grasp how precious and important a single person's life was, my brain would explode like a water balloon. In the realm of the Flower Ornament Sutra, each person, each atom and cell of a person is the entire universe, extending through the trillions of years of space-time. So, given that context, some amount of delusion feels protective to me. It's wonderful when I find people just irritating enough so that I can get on with my day without, as Thomas Merton suggests, worshiping everybody. But the kind of anger and fear I feel when I hear some politicians speak, when unjust laws are passed in my home country or abroad, when immigrants and climate refugees and children come to harm, that anger and fear is like a dark cloud, and I feel like it obscures the clear sun of wisdom. And when I feel this way, I think I can't think my way out of it. And I'm not even sure I can compassion my way out of it. Manjushri and Canon are always listening and caring for sentient beings. But somehow they also seem removed from the mess of life. Samantabhadra feels a little different to me. In my search for feminine models of Buddhist practice, I came across a gorgeous painting by the Edo period artist Katsukawa Shunsho called The Courtesan of Eguchi. And maybe I can send a copy of the piece to Kirk to share around. This painting, which dates to roughly the 1700s in Japan, is a depiction of a beautiful woman in a flowing kimono with a scroll tumbling from her delicate fingers. She's astride a white elephant. This is a representation of the 12th century sex worker, Tae, who lived in the Eguchi licensed quarters in Osaka. The legend giving rise to the painting is that one rainy night, the itinerant monk Saigyo, while on his way to his temple, stopped at her brothel seeking shelter. The two struck up a dialogue on Buddhist metaphysics right there in the licensed quarters of Eguchi. By the Edo period, Tae was often depicted as an incarnation of Samantabhadra, who is usually portrayed in art as riding a white elephant with 6 tusks, one for each of the 6 paramitas. For Samantabhadra to be incarnated not as a monk or as a goddess, but as a woman and a sex worker feels deeply significant to me. The women of the floating world of Edo Japan occupied a marginal, stigmatized position in society, despite being educated and in many cases major trendsetters in art, music, and culture. Many came from poor families where they experienced a kind of debt bondage. This is the case with Hakuin Zenji student Ohashi. She sold herself to a brothel to support her impoverished family after her samurai father lost his position. Hakuin Zenshi gave her the koan, "Who is it that does this work?" I feel that this koan is really vital for all of us who don't have big temples to live inside. Most of us have to ask that question, who is doing this work? Her enlightenment was certified by Hakuin even as she continued to work in the brothel, and her name is now chanted each morning at Tassajara as part of the list of our female ancestors. So, feeling outraged, marginalized, and fearful, I have turned to Samantabhadra, who seems to represent our innate ability to bring forth the Dharma, even in an unjust, painful, or traditionally impure world. In the Avatamsaka Sutra, Samantabhadra spends a lot of time explaining how a bodhisattva, one who accepts and understands how interconnected reality truly is, should behave. In chapter 38, one of the last chapters, the Bodhisattva Samantajnana asks Samantabhadra 200 questions regarding the Bodhisattva's conduct and career. For each question, Samantabhadra provides 10 answers, which means that they make a total of 2,000 answers dealing with different aspects of the Bodhisattva path. So you can imagine this is how a sutra could get to 1,600 pages in length. Among these many, many answers, Samantabhadra lists 10 kinds of universally good mind. And they are as follows. Great enlightening beings develop 10 kinds of universally good mind. 1, they develop a mind of great benevolence to save all beings. 2, they develop a mind of great compassion to bear suffering in the place of all beings. 3, they develop a mind of total giving, relinquishing all they have. 4, they develop a mind that thinks of omniscience above all, gladly seeking all Buddha teachings. 5, they develop a mind adorned with virtues, learning all practices of enlightening beings. 6, they develop an adamantine mind so as not to become heedless wherever they may live. 7, they develop an oceanic mind as all pure qualities flow in. 8, they develop a mind like a mountain, enduring all harsh words. 9, they develop a peaceful mind, giving to all sentient beings without fear. And lastly, 10, they develop a mind with ultimate transcendent wisdom, skillfully observing that all things have no existence. One of our guiding teachers directed us to these minds in a recent Dharma talk, and I am totally in love with them. I find imagery so helpful in cultivating mindfulness practices, and I love when there's a list that feels sort of like a McDonald's dollar menu. I have a copy of these 10 minds printed and posted next to the desk in my office, and I will often choose one to chew on and consider for the day. What would it look like for me to be mountain mind, to endure harsh words by grounding myself in the deep earth that loves me unconditionally? What would it be like for me to manifest an oceanic mind, like the vast blue Pacific Ocean near our home here in Vancouver, to soak in the tributaries of wisdom, kindness, and joy that are everywhere flowing into and through me? What about an adamantine mind, to be a Buddhist Wolverine? But seriously, this is what I want my heart to be like in the midst of suffering, pain, and injustice. I want my heart to be an ocean heart, a mountain heart, a peaceful heart. Again, I don't believe I can think my way into these minds. It has to be, to me, a doing, not a thinking. There is an expression in our school of Zen called Menmitsu no Kafu, or roughly translated, our family style is meeting everything with intimacy and care. That doesn't quite do it justice, which is probably why we aren't printing an otherwise amazing slogan on bumper stickers, t-shirts, and coffee tumblers. The first 2 characters are cotton and carefulness, like a cotton weaver carefully attending to each thread in a warp and weft. And the second 2 characters are family and wind style. It's a very strange, if sweet, collection of characters. I didn't think of this until my community started studying the Flower Ornament Sutra. But that's sort of the teaching, isn't it? We think our lives are these lonely threads, but actually we are so completely and totally woven together, each of our lives warping and wefting around the other, that we really make one garment. Maybe Menmitsu no Kafu really means our family style is to accord our actions with this profound intimacy. If you've practiced in our small family tradition of Zen for any amount of time, you might have an appreciation for why this slogan is so precious to the school. It feels like there is a form for absolutely everything, from entering a zendo to pooping and everywhere in between. There really are detailed instructions for pooping in the traditional rules of Eiheiji Monastery. In monasteries in the West, there is still a very strong emphasis on taking extremely good care of even the smallest tools. Shunryu Suzuki Roshi used to instruct his students to pick up meditation cushions with 2 hands, never to nudge them with one's feet, and always to bow to them to thank them for quietly holding our weight. And decades later, my friend SJ, who is the Tassajara gardener, with a gentle voice and an easy smile, would still firmly correct and admonish any wayward monk who dared put the garden clippers back without a tender clean and polish. I think Suzuki Roshi's ghost would surely have nodded approvingly from a nearby patch of miner's lettuce. In many faith traditions, beliefs must be articulated, studied, and memorized. In Zen, our religion is the practice of doing stuff and discovering the truth of our lives in the doing. To quote something Senior Dharma teacher Ryushin Paul Haller said, in Zen, our daily activities are our spiritual observances. This approach to spirituality has become increasingly precious to me over time. As I grow older, I have become more and more tangled in the slippery vines of my views, opinions, and fears. The temptation to have an easy explanation for the mysteries of my life has been joined now by a growing realization that in the short years I have in this body, I am probably not going to understand a whole lot about the world I've been born into. I don't think I'm going to suddenly figure out on an intellectual level why people are so terrible to each other all the time, or why I was born transgender, or why people want to destroy the planet for plastic straws. So any movement, philosophy, or religion that purports to have the answers is to me marked by a kind of hubris. I put such faith traditions in the same category as the browser pop-up telling me I've won a free Margaritaville cruise. Sounds nice, but I'm not buying it. Zen, on the other hand, says, forget about the answers. Clean your garden clippers, sweep the floor, bow to your friends. To do these things with one's whole energy is like diving into a deep, mysterious pool to find the black dragon pearl buried in its sands. This is the activity of Samantabhadra, I think. I really do feel like this approach to practice is not just for the cushion, but can be applied broadly to basically any area of my life, giving it the Zen flavor of Menmitsu no Kafu, or the practice of Samantabhadra. When I take my estrogen injection, can I do so as if I was performing a tea ceremony? Can I bow to the syringe? Can I set the vial down on the table with respect? What does it mean to exercise Menmitsu no Kafu, or awakened action, when I write emails? How is it to be a mountain or an ocean when I kiss my partner, when I pay my credit card bill, when I vote in an election, when I read the news and cry? For me, the radical idea is that each of these tasks, from thrilling to mundane, are pools containing that pearl. Dare I dive in? And I think I'll stop there.
Thank you, River. Let's see. Sorry, I'm having a little glitch here.